The great crystal towers of Xephoria Prime stretched toward the purple sky-like fingers reaching for the stars. Between them, floating platforms carried beings of many shapes and sizes through the ancient city. Some walked on two legs like humans. Others slithered on belly scales, and a few floated in bubbles of strange gas. This was the heart of the galaxy's oldest civilization, where the Zephyrians had built their empire over 50,000 years. At the center of the city stood the great observatory, a massive dome made of living crystal that pulsed with soft blue light. Inside this sacred place lived the Oracle of Ages, the most powerful mind reader in the known galaxy. Her name was Vexthara, and she had been alive for over 3,000 years. During all that time, she had never left the observatory. Did not need to. Mind could travel across space and time, seeing glimpses of what might happen in the future. Today, like every day for the past 1,000 years, visitors came to ask her questions. They brought gifts of rare metals and ancient books, hoping to learn what tomorrow would bring. Most went away disappointed. The Oracle spoke only when she chose to, and her words were often puzzling. Ambassador Krell stood before the Oracle's throne, his forearms crossed in frustration. His people, the Drachnari, were warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds. They were strong, proud, and not used to waiting. But here, in this quiet place, even the mighty Drachnari had to be patient. "Great Oracle," Krell said, his voice deep and rough like grinding stone. "My people face a choice. Should we attack the Hive Collective now, or wait for better weapons?" The Oracle sat perfectly still on her throne of white stone. She was tall and thin, with skin that seemed to glow from within. Her eyes were completely black, like holes in space.
Ow.
She had not moved or spoken for 3 hours. Beside Krell stood Diplomat Yith, a gentle being who looked like a walking tree. His people, the Celestial Union, believed in peace above all things. They had never fought a war, but they were skilled at helping others solve their problems without violence. "Perhaps," Yith said softly, "the Oracle sees a path that requires no fighting at all." Krell made a noise that sounded like a growl. Easy words from someone who has never held a weapon. The Hive Collective grows stronger each day. They have already taken 6 worlds. Soon they will come for ours. Other visitors waited in the shadows around the great chamber. There was Captain Zex from the Merchant Guild, hoping to learn which trade routes would be profitable next year. High Priest Morthic from the Zephyrian Council wanted to know if their ancient traditions would survive the changing times. A dozen other beings from across the galaxy waited their turn to speak with the Oracle. But Vexthara remained silent, her mind elsewhere. She had been having strange dreams lately, visions that made no sense. She saw a small blue world orbiting, a yellow star, far away in a part of the galaxy that most people ignored. On this world lived creatures that looked almost like young Zephyrians. But with shorter lives and stranger ways, in her visions, these creatures were building ships and reaching for the stars. They were loud and curious and seemed to have no fear of anything. The Oracle had been watching them for months, trying to understand why they appeared so often in her dreams. Suddenly, the Oracle's eyes snapped open wide. Her body began to shake, and the crystal walls of the observatory pulsed with bright light. Everyone in the chamber stepped back in alarm. In all the years they had known her, the Oracle had never shown such strong emotion. "What is it?" Krell demanded. "What do you see?" The Oracle's voice came out as a whisper that somehow filled the entire chamber. "I see the end of everything we know." The gathered visitors looked at each other with worry. The Oracle's prophecies were always true, but they were usually about small things like trade disputes or weather patterns. She had never spoken of anything this serious. "Tell us," Youth said gently. "What threatens the galaxy?" The Oracle stood up from her throne for the first time in decades. She walked to the great window that looked out over the city and pointed toward the distant stars. "In the spiral arm beyond the Void Nebula," she said, her voice growing stronger, "a young species awakens. They call themselves humans. They have only just learned to travel between stars, but they will change everything." Krell laughed, a harsh sound like breaking metal. "Humans? I have heard of them. They are nothing. A few small worlds, primitive technology. My people could conquer them in a single day. That is what makes them dangerous, the oracle replied. They're not dangerous because they are strong. They are dangerous because of what they are. She turned away from the window and looked at each visitor in turn. Her black eyes seemed to see straight through them. I have watched this galaxy for 3,000 years, she continued. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have seen species evolve and die out. I have seen wars that lasted centuries and peace that lasted millennia. I've never seen anything like these humans. What makes them special? Asked Captain Zex. Do they have some secret weapon? No, the oracle said. They have something far more dangerous. They have hope. The visitors exchanged confused looks. Hope was not usually considered a weapon or a threat. They do not accept that things must stay the same, the oracle explained. When they see a problem, they try to fix it. When they see a limit, they try to go beyond it. When they see something that everyone says is impossible, they try to make it possible. High Priest Morthix stepped forward. With respect, great oracle, many species have these qualities. The Zephyrians themselves once explored and built and dreamed of greater things. Yes, the oracle agreed. But that was 50,000 years ago. Now, you are content with what you have. If you follow the old ways and do not seek to change them. The humans are different. They will never be content. They will always want to do more, to be more, to reach higher. She began walking in a circle. Around the chamber, her footsteps echoing in the silence. In my visions, I see them touching every world in the galaxy. Not as conquerors, but as friends and helpers. They will offer their knowledge freely. They will share their discoveries. They will inspire others to dream bigger dreams. That sounds wonderful, Yith said. Why does this frighten you? The oracle stopped walking and faced him. Because change is frightening to those who have found comfort in staying the same. These humans will not mean to threaten anyone, but their very existence will challenge everything we believe about how the galaxy should work. She returned to her throne and sat down heavily, as if the visions had drained her strength. The ancient treaties rewritten. I see the old boundaries erased. I see species that have been enemies for millennia learning to work together. I see civilizations that have remained unchanged for thousands of years, suddenly growing and evolving in ways they never imagined. And this is bad? Asked Captain Zex. It is neither good nor bad, the oracle replied. It simply is. But it will be the end of the galaxy as we know it. The humans are coming, and nothing will ever be the same again. The chamber fell silent. Everyone tried to understand what the oracle had told them. A young species that would change everything just by being themselves. It seemed impossible. What should we do? Krell asked finally. The oracle closed her eyes and settled back into her throne. You should prepare for the greatest change in galactic history, and you should decide whether you will fight against it or learn to embrace it. With those words, she fell silent again. The visitors waited for more explanation, but none came. The oracle had returned to her meditative state, leaving them to wonder what the future would bring. As they left the observatory, each carried the same troubling thought. If the oracle was right, if these humans really were coming to change everything, then the galaxy they had always known was already beginning to die. The only question was, what would be born in its place? 6 months had passed since the oracle's warning about the humans. Most of the galaxy's leaders had dismissed her words as the ramblings of an ancient mind that had finally grown too old. But Science Director Quindell of the Zephyrian Research Council could not forget what he had heard that day in the observatory. Now he stood on the bridge of his research vessel, the Starlight Seeker, watching the stars stream past through the viewing window. His ship was heading toward the outer rim of the galaxy, to a sector that most civilized beings considered worthless. There were no valuable minerals there, no strategic positions, nothing but empty space and a few small worlds orbiting ordinary stars. But according to the oracle, this was where the humans lived. And Quindell had convinced his superiors to let him study them. The director called his assistant, a young Zephyrian named Kira. We are approaching the coordinates. Long range. Sensors show a small space station ahead. Quindel moved to the sensor station and looked at the readings. The station was crude by Zephyrian standards, built from metal and plastic instead of living crystal. It had rough edges and simple designs like something a child might build with blocks. There is also a ship nearby, Kira reported. It appears to be moving toward us. On the main screen, a boxy vessel came into view. It was smaller than the Starlight Seeker and looked like it had been built in pieces, then welded together. Strange markings covered its hull, and it moved with the unsteady motion of primitive engines. This had to be a human ship. Open communication. Channels, Quindel ordered. Let us see what these dangerous humans are like. The screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at the strangest face Quindel had ever seen. It was similar to a Zephyrian face, but shorter and broader, with hair growing from the top of its head. The creature's eyes were small and brown, and its mouth was curved in what might have been a smile. "Hello there," the creature said in a voice that sounded friendly and curious. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human exploration ship New Horizons. We don't recognize your ship design. Are you folks from around here?" Quindel was surprised by the casual tone. Most species used formal protocols when meeting strangers. In space, they announced their empire, listed their achievements, and demanded to know the other ship's intentions. This human simply said hello and asked a question like they were neighbors meeting in a garden. "I am Science Director Quindel of the Zephyrian Research Council," he replied, trying to match the human's informal style. "We have come to learn more about your people." The human's face brightened with excitement. "Really? That's fantastic. We've been hoping to meet other intelligent species. Would you like to come aboard our ship? Or we could visit yours. We've got coffee and some pretty good food, though I guess you might not be able to eat our stuff." Again, Quindel was puzzled. The human offered hospitality before knowing anything about the Zephyrians. Most species would spend hours negotiating safe meeting conditions, demanding proof of peaceful intentions, and establishing complex rules for interaction. This human just invited them over for coffee, whatever that was. "We would be honored to visit your vessel," Quindel said. "If you are certain it is safe." Captain Morrison laughed. "Well, the coffee might keep you awake, but that's about the worst thing that could happen. Come on over." Hour later, Quindel found himself in the most chaotic spaceship he had ever seen. The human vessel was cramped and noisy, with pipes and wires running along the walls like metal vines. Strange smells filled the air, and he could hear the constant hum of machinery that sounded like it might break down at any moment. But the crew seemed completely comfortable in this environment. Captain Morrison introduced him to Chief Engineer Lisa Parker, a small female human with bright eyes and grease-stained hands. She was working on some kind of device while they talked, her fingers moving quickly among tiny components. "Sorry about the mess," she said without looking up from her work. "We're trying to fix the quantum resonance chamber. The thing keeps making this weird noise, and Jake's worried it might explode." "It exploded last week," added Dr. Ben Rogers. The ship's medical officer, he was a tall human with gray hair and a gentle manner. Lisa had it working again in 2 days, using spare parts from the coffee machine. Quindel stared at them in amazement. They were discussing a quantum resonance chamber, one of the most complex pieces of technology in the galaxy, as if it were a broken household appliance. And they had repaired it with parts from a food preparation device? "Your ship has quantum drive technology?" he asked. "Oh sure," Captain Morrison said proudly. "Lisa here figured out how to build one from some plans we found on the Galactic Data Network. Took her about 3 months. It's pretty impressive, right?" Quindel's mind reeled. It had taken the Zephyrians centuries to develop quantum drive technology. Their greatest scientists had worked for generations to understand the principles involved. But this human engineer had learned it in 3 months and built one using spare parts. "Perhaps you could show me your engineering section?" he requested. Lisa's face lit up with enthusiasm. "Absolutely. I love showing off my work. Just watch your head on the low pipes and don't touch anything that's glowing green." The engineering section was even more chaotic than the rest of the ship. Tools and parts were scattered everywhere, and several different projects seemed to be in progress at once. But as Lisa explained her work, Quindel began to understand that there was a method to the madness. The humans had taken technology from a dozen different sources and combined them in ways that no one had ever tried before. They used Drachnary power systems with Celestial Union navigation computers and their own human-designed life support systems. It should not have worked, but somehow it did. The trick is not to follow the rules too closely, Lisa explained as she tinkered with a control panel. Most species stick to their own tech because that's what they know. But we figure, if it works for them, why not try mixing it up? Sometimes you get interesting results. Sometimes you get explosions, Dr. Rogers added with a smile. Small ones, Lisa protested. Well, mostly small ones. As they talked, alarms suddenly began blaring throughout the ship. Red lights flashed, and the deck shook under their feet. Captain Morrison's voice came over the communication system. Lisa, we've got a problem. The Zephyrian ship is in trouble. Their engines just went dead, and they're drifting toward that asteroid field. Lisa grabbed her tools and ran toward the exit. Come on, Doc. Looks like we've got some repair work to do. Quindle followed them back to the bridge, where Captain Morrison was studying the sensor readings with a worried expression. Through the viewing window, they could see the Starlight Seeker tumbling slowly through space, its lights flickering weakly. What happened? Quindle asked, his voice tight with concern for his crew. Looks like a cascade failure in your quantum matrix, Lisa said, reading the sensor data. Probably caused by exposure to cosmic radiation from that pulsar we passed an hour ago. The shielding on your ship is really good, but quantum systems are sensitive. Can it be repaired? Quindle asked. Maybe, Lisa said thoughtfully. Not with your ship's tools. You'd need to completely rebuild the quantum resonance chamber, and that requires components you don't have. Captain Morrison was already moving toward the airlock. Then we'll have to do it with our components, Lisa. Grab everything you need. Ben, get your medical kit in case anyone was hurt. We're going to help our new friends. Wait, Quindle said, confused. You would risk your own ship to help strangers. The three humans looked at him with expressions of genuine surprise. Of course, Dr. Rogers said simply, You're in trouble. That's what people do. They help each other. Besides, Lisa added with a grin, I've never worked on a Zephyrian quantum system before. This should be fun. For the next 3 days, the humans worked tirelessly to repair the Starlight Seeker. They shared their food, their tools, and their knowledge without asking for anything in return. Lisa Parker spent 18 hours straight, rebuilding the quantum chamber, using parts from both ships, and inventing new solutions when the standard methods did not work. Dr. Rogers treated the Zephyrian crew members who had been injured when their ship lost power, learning their anatomy. As he worked in developing new techniques to help them, Captain Morrison coordinated the rescue effort while sharing stories and jokes that somehow made the dangerous situation feel less frightening. By the time the repairs were complete, Quindle felt like he understood something important about humans. They were not threatening because they were aggressive or violent. They were threatening because they made everything they touched better. And they did it without thinking about the consequences. As the two ships prepared to part ways, Captain, Morrison made one final offer. We'd love to show you around and learn more about your people. Maybe we could work together on some projects? After the human ship had disappeared into hyperspace, Quindle sat alone in his quarters, writing his report to the Zephyrian Council. How could he explain what he had witnessed? How could he describe a species that treated complex technology like simple puzzles? That helped strangers without hesitation, that seemed to have no limits? To their curiosity and creativity? 2 years had passed since Captain Morrison and his crew first met the Zephyrians. In that short time, everything had begun to change. Word of the helpful humans had spread across the galaxy like ripples in a pond, reaching species that had never heard of Earth before. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of the human flagship Constellation, watching as 3 different alien vessels approached through hyperspace. Her fleet had grown from a handful of exploration ships to over 50 vessels, all working to establish peaceful contact with the galaxy's many civilizations. Admiral called Lieutenant Commander Ryan Torres from the communications station. We're receiving messages from the Drachnary battlecruiser Vengeance, a Celestial Union ship Harmony, and a merchant guild transport called Prophet's Edge, all requesting permission to dock. Kate smiled as she looked at the strange mix of ships gathering around her vessel. 6 months ago, These three species would never have been found in the same star system together. The Dracnarian Celestial Union had been enemies for centuries. While the Merchant Guild stayed neutral by avoiding everyone else entirely, grant permission to all three, she ordered. Prepare the main conference room. Looks like we have another trade negotiation to oversee. This had become common over the past year. Species that had been unable to work together for millennia were suddenly finding ways to cooperate, with humans serving as neutral mediators. Kate was not sure how it had happened, but somehow her people had become the galaxy's unofficial problem solvers. Dr. Alex Chen walked onto the bridge carrying a tablet full of translation algorithms. As the fleet's xenobiologist, he had become an expert at helping different species understand each other. His latest project was a universal translator that could work with any form of communication, from spoken words to chemical signals. The new translation matrix is ready for testing, he reported. I think we've finally solved the problem with the Hive Collective's pheromone language. Commander Santos wants to try it out during her next diplomatic mission. Kate nodded approvingly. The Hive Collective had been one of their biggest challenges. The insect-like species communicated entirely through scent chemicals, making normal conversation impossible. But Alex had spent months studying their biology and had finally found a way to convert their chemical messages into words that other species could understand. Any word from the terraforming project? Kate asked. Captain Maria Santos reports. That new garden is ahead of schedule, Dr. Chen replied. They've successfully converted the atmosphere on 3 dead worlds, and the first colonists should arrive next month. The Zephyrians are calling it impossible, but Maria's team keeps proving them wrong. Kate looked out at the stars and wondered what the Oracle of Ages would think if she could see what was happening now. The ancient being had warned that humans would change everything, and she had been right. But the changes were happening faster than anyone had expected. The door to the bridge opened, and Commander Rick Thompson entered with a satisfied expression on his face. He had just returned from the Dracnary home system, where he had been helping to end their war with the Hive Collective. How did it go? Kate asked. Rick grinned. The fighting stopped 3 days ago. Turns out the whole war started because of a misunderstanding. The Hive Collective wasn't trying to invade Dracnary space. They were just looking for a place to build new colonies, and they didn't know how to ask permission properly. So you solved a century-long war with a conversation? Dr. Chen asked in amazement. Pretty much, Rick replied. Once we got Alex's translator working, both sides realized they actually wanted the same thing. And the Dracnary get a powerful ally instead of a dangerous enemy. General Vactor wasn't happy about it at first, but even he had to admit it made sense. Kate shook her head in wonder. A war that had cost millions of lives ended because humans had taught 2 species how to talk to each other properly. It was exactly the kind of thing that made other civilizations nervous about human influence. The communication system chimed, and Lieutenant Torres looked up from his station. Admiral, we're receiving a priority message from Earth. It's from the Cultural Exchange Program. The main screen lit up with the image of Amy Foster, one of Earth's most famous composers. She was standing in what looked like a concert hall filled with beings from dozens of different species. Behind her, a mixed orchestra was preparing to perform, with human musicians sitting next to aliens of every shape and size. Admiral Sullivan, Amy said with excitement in her voice. I wanted to let you know that our first Galactic Symphony is ready for its premiere. We have musicians from over 30 species, and the music combines elements from all their cultures. It's something completely new. Kate could see tears of joy in the composer's eyes. Amy had been working for months to create music that would appeal to species with completely different hearing abilities and cultural backgrounds. The fact that she had succeeded was another small miracle. The concert will be broadcast across the galaxy, Amy continued. The Celestial Union is providing the transmission network, and even the Zephyrian Council has agreed to listen. This could be the first time in galactic history that every civilized species experiences the same work of art at the same time. After the transmission ended, Kate found herself thinking about the Oracle's prophecy again. The ancient being had said that humans would inspire others to dream bigger dreams. Looking at everything that had happened in just 2 years, it was clear that the prophecy was coming true. Dr. Sandra Lee's philosophy seminars were being attended by scholars from every major civilization. Her ideas about individual freedom and personal potential were causing revolutions in thinking across the galaxy. The rigid caste systems that many species had used for thousands of years were beginning to crumble. Engineer Paul Martinez had shared his fusion technology freely with anyone who wanted it, making energy practically unlimited for most civilizations. This had solved resource problems that had caused conflicts for centuries, but it had also disrupted economic systems that depended on scarcity. Dr. Helen Carter's medical breakthroughs had extended the lifespans of dozens of species, leading to population booms that forced entire civilizations to reconsider their social structures. Young beings who had expected to live only a few decades were suddenly facing centuries of life, and they wanted to make the most of it on Earth. Poet Daniel Wright was creating works that somehow spoke to the hearts of beings who had never even seen a human before. His words about hope, growth, and the beauty of diversity were being translated into hundreds of languages and inspiring a renaissance of creativity across the galaxy. But not everyone was happy with these changes. Kate had been receiving reports of growing resistance among conservative factions in several civilizations. Some species leaders were beginning to see human influence as a threat to their traditional ways of life. High Counselor Morthic of the Zephyrian Council had sent several formal complaints about human interference in galactic affairs. He argued that humans were disrupting the careful balance of power that had kept the galaxy stable for millennia. General Vactor of the Drachnary Empire was also expressing concerns. Despite the successful peace with the Hive Collective, he worried that human ideas about cooperation and diplomacy were making his people soft and unprepared for real threats. Even Captain Zex of the Merchant Guild was complaining that human generosity was destroying traditional trade relationships. When humans shared their technology freely instead of selling it, it made normal commerce almost impossible. Kate understood their concerns. Change was always frightening, especially for civilizations that had found comfort in doing things the same way for thousands of years. But she also knew that the changes were mostly positive. Wars were ending, diseases were being cured, and species that had been enemies were learning to work together. The question was whether the benefits of change would outweigh the fear it created. Kate had a feeling that the galaxy was approaching a critical moment when it would have to choose between embracing the future or fighting to preserve the past, as if reading her thoughts. Dr. Chen looked up from his tablet with a worried expression. "Admiral, I'm receiving reports from our embassy on Zephyria Prime. There's been an emergency session of the Galactic Council. They're discussing something called the human question." An emergency session meant that something serious was happening, and the phrase human question did not sound promising. "What kind of discussion?" she asked. Dr. Chen read from his tablet. "According to our ambassador, there's a growing movement among conservative factions to limit human contact with other species. They're calling it a protective measure to preserve galactic diversity." Kate understood immediately what this meant. After 2 years of peaceful cooperation and mutual benefit, some species were so frightened by the pace of change that they wanted to isolate humanity from the rest of the galaxy. The Oracle had been right about humans being a threat, but the threat was not destruction or conquest. The threat was that humans made other species want to become more than they had ever imagined possible. 5 years had passed since the Oracle's first warning about humanity. The galaxy she had known for 3,000 years was disappearing, replaced by something new and strange. On Zephyria Prime, High Counselor Morthic stood in the emergency session chamber, surrounded by representatives from dozens of worried civilizations. "The humans have gone too far," he declared, his voice echoing through the crystal dome. "They arrive as friends, but they destroy everything they touch. Not with weapons, but with their ideas. Our young people no longer respect the ancient ways. They question traditions that have guided us for millennia." General Vacta of the Drachnary Empire nodded his massive head in agreement. His forearms were crossed in frustration as he spoke. "My warriors now prefer negotiation to battle. They study human philosophy instead of weapons training. The strength that made us great is being replaced by weakness. Around the chamber, other leaders shared similar complaints. The Merchant Guild representative complained that human generosity had made traditional trade impossible. The high priests of several religions worried that human ideas about individual choice were destroying their authority. Even some celestial union members feared that rapid change was threatening their peaceful way of life. But not everyone agreed with the conservative position. Sitting in the back of the chamber, Science Director Quindell listened to the complaints with growing anger. He had spent years studying humans and had seen firsthand what they were truly like. "You speak of destruction," he said, rising to his feet. "But I have seen only creation. Humans ended the war between the Drachnary and Hive Collective. They had cured diseases that killed millions. They share their knowledge freely and ask for nothing in return." "That is exactly the problem," Morthic replied coldly. "They give too much, too freely. They upset the natural order. Species are meant to develop at their own pace, not be pushed forward by outside influence." Quindell's daughter, Zara, stood up beside him. She was young by Zephyrian standards, barely 200 years old, but she had spent time at human universities and had learned things that amazed her elders. "The natural order you speak of has kept us unchanged for 50,000 years, she said boldly. "Humans have shown us that we can be more than we ever imagined. Why should we fear growth?" Her words caused angry murmurs throughout the chamber. For a young Zephyrian to challenge the wisdom of her elders was almost unthinkable. But Zara was not alone. Across the galaxy, young beings from every species were asking similar questions. On the Drachnary homeworld, a war hero named Kextal had returned from fighting alongside human soldiers. He had learned tactics and strategies that made the old ways of warfare seem crude and wasteful. More importantly, he had learned that there were alternatives to fighting that could achieve better results. "The humans taught me that true strength comes from knowing when not to fight," he had told his fellow warriors. "A battle you prevent is better than a battle you win." Such ideas would have been considered treason just a few years earlier. Now they were being discussed openly in Drachnary military academies, much to the horror of traditional generals like Vactor. Meanwhile, in the Celestial Union, young diplomats were using human communication techniques to solve problems that had puzzled their elders for centuries. They were making contact with isolated species and bringing them into the galactic community. Through patience and understanding, rather than formal protocols, the changes were happening everywhere, and they were accelerating. Captain Jennifer Clark had just led the first joint species expedition to the galaxy's core, where they had discovered ancient ruins that completely changed the understanding of galactic history. The expedition included young beings from every major civilization, working together in ways their ancestors would have thought impossible. But the discovery at the galactic core had revealed something troubling. The ruins belonged to a civilization that had disappeared millions of years ago, apparently because they had grown too fast and changed too quickly. The conservative faction seized on this discovery as proof that rapid change was dangerous. "You see," Morthic proclaimed at the emergency session, "even the ancients learned that progress without limits leads to destruction. We must act now to preserve what we have built." The debate continued for hours, with each side presenting arguments for their position. The conservatives wanted to establish a quarantine around human space, limiting contact between humans and other species. They believed this would stop the spread of human influence and allow traditional civilizations to return to their natural state. The progressives, led by beings like Quindell and his daughter, argued that such action would be both impossible and wrong. Human ideas had already spread too far to be contained, and trying to stop them would only create resentment and conflict. As the argument grew more heated, a new voice joined the discussion. Communication system activated, and the image of the Oracle of Ages appeared on the main screen. She looked older than when she had first warned about humanity, and her black eyes seemed to hold deep sadness. "I have been watching," she said quietly. "I have seen what my warning has created. Fear where there should be wonder, division where there should be unity." The chamber fell silent. Even the most powerful leaders showed respect for the ancient oracle. "Great Oracle," Morthic said formally, You warned us that humans would threaten our galaxy. We seek only to follow your wisdom." The oracle's image flickered slightly, as if she were very far away. "I did warn of a threat, but I did not say it was a threat to be fought.
I said it
Was a threat to everything we know. Sometimes the death of one thing is necessary for the birth of something better." Her words sent shockwaves through the assembly. The oracle had never before suggested that change might be desirable. "You speak in riddles," General Vactor complained. "Tell us plainly what we should do." The oracle was quiet for a long moment, as if seeing visions that the others could not share. When she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of millennia. "I have spent 3,000 years in my crystal tower, watching the galaxy from afar. I have seen empires rise and fall, species evolve and go extinct. I have watched the dance of civilizations as they interact and change each other. But I have never participated in that dance myself." She paused, and her image seemed to solidify, becoming clearer and more present. "The humans have taught me something I had forgotten. Knowledge gained in isolation is incomplete. Wisdom earned through separation is limited. To truly understand what is happening, I must see it with my own eyes." The assembled leaders stared in amazement as the oracle made an announcement that shook the foundations of galactic civilization. "I am leaving my observatory," she declared. "For the first time in 3,000 years, I will travel among the stars. I will go to Earth and meet these humans face to face. Only then can I truly understand whether they are a threat to be feared or a gift to be embraced." The communication ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. The Oracle of Ages, who had never left her crystal tower, was abandoning her sacred post to visit the humans personally. It was an event so unprecedented that no one knew how to respond. Morthic tried to regain control of the situation. "The Oracle has clearly been influenced by human corruption. Cannot wait for her return. We must act now to protect our civilizations." His words fell on increasingly deaf ears. Many of the assembled leaders were beginning to wonder if the humans really were as dangerous as they had believed. If the wisest being in the galaxy was willing to seek them out personally, perhaps there was more to learn than to fear. As the emergency session dissolved into confused discussions, messages were already being sent across the galaxy. The Oracle was coming to Earth. The ancient being who had never left her homeworld was traveling to see the humans for herself. On Earth, Admiral Kate Sullivan received the news with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Hosting the most revered figure in galactic civilization would be both an honor and a tremendous responsibility. But she also knew that the Oracle's visit might determine the future of human relations with the rest of the galaxy. Dr. Alex Chen was already working on translation protocols that could handle the Oracle's ancient dialect. Captain Maria Santos was preparing Earth's finest facilities for the historic visit. And across human space, people were asking the same question that had puzzled aliens for 5 years. What made humans so special that they could inspire change across an entire galaxy? The Oracle was coming to find out, and her answer would determine whether humanity's gift to the galaxy would be accepted or rejected by the civilizations they had tried so hard to help. The Oracle's ship appeared above Earth like a crystal star falling from heaven. It was beautiful beyond words, made of living crystal that pulsed with soft blue light. No one in human space had ever seen anything like it. The ancient vessel moved with grace that made human ships look clumsy by comparison. President Carol Adams stood in the reception chamber of the orbital station Unity, watching through the viewing window as the Oracle's shuttle approached. She had been chosen to represent all of humanity in this historic meeting. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on her shoulders like a mountain. Beside her waited Admiral Kate Sullivan, Dr. Alex Chen, and other human leaders who had been working to build relationships with alien species. They all knew that the next few hours might determine whether humanity would be welcomed into the galactic community or cut off from it forever. The shuttle docked with barely a whisper of sound. When the airlock opened, the Oracle of Ages stepped through, and everyone in the chamber felt the power of her presence. She was tall and graceful, with skin that seemed to glow from within. Her black eyes held the wisdom of millennia, but also something that surprised the humans: curiosity. "Welcome to Earth, Great Oracle," President Adams said formally. "We are honored by your visit." The Oracle looked around the chamber with interest, taking in every detail. The walls were decorated with art from Earth's many cultures, and music played softly in the background. The air smelled of flowers from the station's garden sections. "This is not what I expected," the Oracle said quietly. "Your space station feels alive, like a place where people truly live rather than simply work." Dr. Chen stepped forward with a small device in his hands. "Great Oracle, I have prepared translation protocols if you need them, but your grasp of our language seems perfect." The Oracle smiled, an expression that transformed her ancient face. "I have been listening to your communications for years. Your language is surprisingly beautiful. It has words for concepts that other species have never considered." She walked to the viewing window and looked down at Earth's blue surface. White clouds swirled over green continents and deep blue oceans. The sight seemed to fascinate her. "I have watched this world from afar," she said. "But seeing it with my own eyes is different. There's something here that does not exist anywhere else in the galaxy." "What do you see?" Admiral Sullivan asked. The Oracle was quiet for a moment, as if searching for the right words. "I see change that never stops. Most worlds reach a stable state and remain there for millions of years. But your world keeps growing, keeps becoming something new. Even from space, I can feel the energy of transformation." Over the next 3 days, the Oracle toured Earth and its colonies. She visited cities and farms, schools and laboratories, art galleries and music halls. Everywhere she went, she observed humans doing what they did naturally: learning, creating, helping each other, and constantly trying to make things better. In New York, she watched children from dozens of different backgrounds playing together in a park. In Tokyo, she saw scientists and artists working side by side on projects that combined technology with beauty. In Geneva, she observed the Global Council making decisions that affected billions of people, with every voice being heard and considered. But what impressed her most was a small hospital in rural Kenya, where Dr. Helen Carter was working with local doctors to fight a disease that had puzzled medical experts for decades. The Oracle watched as human and alien medical technology was combined with traditional healing methods to create a treatment that worked better than anything tried before. "You take the best from every source," the Oracle observed. "You do not reject old ways simply because they are old, nor new ways simply because they are strange." Dr. Carter looked up from her work, surprised to find the most powerful being in the galaxy watching her treat patients. "We learned that from you," she said simply. "When we met the Zephyrians, we realized that different species have different strengths. The trick is figuring out how to combine them." The Oracle nodded slowly. "But you do more than combine. You transform, take separate pieces, and create something entirely new." That evening, the Oracle attended a concert in Earth's orbital amphitheater. Amy Foster's Galactic Symphony was being performed by musicians from 30 different species. The music began with traditional melodies from each world. Gradually, the different themes began to merge and evolve, creating harmonies that no single species could have imagined alone. As the music played, the Oracle closed her eyes and let the sounds wash over her. For the first time in millennia, she felt something she had almost forgotten: hope for the future. After the concert, she met with President Adams in a quiet garden aboard the station. Earth hung in the viewing window, like a jewel against the stars. "I understand now," the Oracle said. "When I first warned about your species, I saw only the end of what existed. I could not see what would replace it." "What do you see now?" President Adams asked. The Oracle turned away from the window and looked directly at the human leader. "I see the next step in galactic evolution. It's not conquest or destruction, but growth beyond anything we thought possible." She stood and walked among the garden plants, touching leaves and flowers with gentle fingers. "For 50,000 years, my people have remained unchanged. We believed that stability was wisdom, that staying the same was strength. But you have shown us that growth is the only true strength." The next morning, the Oracle made her final pronouncement. It was broadcast across the galaxy, reaching every civilized world and space station. The message was simple, but revolutionary. I have seen the humans with my own eyes, she announced. I've walked among them and learned their ways. They are, indeed, a threat to everything we know. They threaten stagnation with growth. They threaten isolation with cooperation. They threaten fear with hope. She paused, and her image seemed to grow brighter on screens across the galaxy. This is not a threat to be fought, but a gift to be embraced. The humans do not seek to rule the galaxy. They seek to help it become more than it ever dreamed possible. And in trying to help others, they reveal the potential that exists in all of us. The conservative coalition's plan for quarantine collapsed overnight. Young beings from every species had been waiting for permission to embrace the changes they had already begun to feel. The Oracle's words gave them that permission. Zara Quindel's daughter, elected to the Zephyrian Council by the largest margin in their history. Kextal became the new leader of the Drachnary military, implementing training programs that emphasized wisdom over violence. Across the galaxy, the younger generation took control from elders who had been too afraid to change. But the revolution was peaceful. The humans had taught them that growth did not require destroying what came before, but building upon it. Ancient traditions were preserved but transformed, given new meaning in a galaxy that was learning to see itself with fresh eyes. The Oracle returned to Zephyria Prime. But she did not go back to her crystal tower. Instead, she established a new observatory on New Geneva, humanity's first joint colony world. They're surrounded by children from dozens of species. She began to study not what might happen in the future, but how to help shape it. Years later, when historians tried to understand how humanity had transformed the galaxy so quickly, they pointed to the Oracle's final prophecy. She had seen the truth that others missed. Humanity's greatest weapon was not technology or strategy, but their absolute belief that tomorrow could be better than today. In the end, the oldest oracle in the galaxy had spoken of one threat. She had been right about everything except one detail. Humanity was not a threat to the galaxy. They were the galaxy's salvation from the greatest enemy of all, the fear of becoming something better. The ancient fear of change had been replaced by the excitement of possibility. And in that transformation, the galaxy had finally learned to truly live.